Hi there, it's Zero, and I decided to make a video on this, so I built a little presentation, and we'll talk about an example of what I kind of see as simplicity within the Agile framework. But my main goal in making this is really just to have a conversation around the skills of Nadro and how we can build ourselves up from that beginner level to a very proficient level, and how we can kind of overcome some of the basic pitfalls of the starting student. So normally what I see is most people, they get the course, they consume all the content, and it could be within a month, 6 months, doesn't matter. But after they consume that content, they start trading the entire framework. And that causes one of two problems. You can either fall into camp A, where you're more risk averse and you are overwhelmed by the multitude of narratives and competing references and balancing out confluence and DVA and intraday and all this stuff. And that can cause problems with execution, analysis by paralysis, or not executing at all, or, poor execution, inconsistent ideas, all that can fall in there. Camp B would probably be your more risk seeking group, where they just have the references and they do what I call trading references. They have a bearish reference, the price comes up there, there's a Heikin-Ashi shift, they're in. There's not much consideration besides the fact that there's a line on their chart and there's a turn and they're in. Some people don't even have a turn, right? So these groups in and of themselves have one simple connecting problem. They don't have a trade. They have an idea, or they have a framework that has edge, and they're trying to trade the whole framework rather than focusing on simplicity and developing themselves in the skills in Nadro so that they can be more proficient by the end. So let's talk about what I see as the model for a good thing to do whenever you're first starting or first done consuming all the content and you're kind of working your way through the skills. I put these core questions here because I think that they're the essential problem that most students have. They don't know which narrative they should act on or why. They don't have an idea on how to access that narrative or its continuation. They don't know which ideas are best opportunities for them and why. And all of these questions really come down to one simple word: process. It's the process that we build for ourselves in order to execute within that day's, market or whatever we're doing. Now, that's a hard question in and of itself because, well, how do I build a process? How do I do all this? That's what I kind of want to lean into in the next part of this conversation. Because if you are falling into one of those two camps where you're over seeking risk or under seeking it, and you're, kind of in that group where you're finding trades everywhere, or you're not finding that many trades, or you're just stuck at a point where you're having problems analyzing, your biggest issue is that you're not filtering the market generated information at all. You're just trading all of the Nadro framework because it's there. That's the key. Building a hierarchy, building a methodology that you can start from the ground up in a simple way and then get more complex. Add more complexity to it later, but not right now. Let's just start at a simple level. So for me, the most important part for you to start with is the laws of market dynamics. You want to know these inside and out, up and down, left, right, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth dimension, ninth dimension, string theory, all the way up to the 21st dimension, whatever. You want to know everything there is to know about the laws of market dynamics because they are the foundation of the risk reward landscape that Merit has built in the Nadro framework. They are narrative. Whether you know that right now or not, they are the narrative that you are executing on or trying to find. These rules set the risk reward landscape for your trade. They are that important. So it's important that you know what they mean for current price, how they can set your targets, and why they establish your risk, your stop, whatever you want to call that. These are, like I said, the rules or the process around executing an idea within the Nadro framework. Matter of fact, whenever I first started 2 years ago with the Nadro, learning Nadro and all that stuff, the first thing I did was build a huge presentation. This is just for myself. No one ever saw it really, except right now, where I went through and I broke down. I made these little price bars in PowerPoint, bar by bar, and I just made a movement of what I think a price might look like on a chart. And I applied a couple of value areas to it and just started looking at the laws of market dynamics, just this price movement here and what it might do with each law of market dynamic. And what I tried to do was visualize one movement in price that I could kind of encapsulate all of the laws and read them and understand where trades are and where they trade and trades aren't. That's what I did very early on. That's the kind of work that it is required for you to develop the simple skills in the beginning. You want to absorb them and internalize them so you can create from them. That's the key. It's a very simple learning model that's being taught, all across the country right now. If you're a teacher or have any educational experience, the first thing you want to do with any student is you want them to take in the information and regurgitate it. All right, what are my laws of market dynamics? Here's law 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, great. Then you want them to understand what those laws actually mean, what they are, how they work, why they work. Then you want them to create from it. In other words, you want them to build their process around it. That's what's key about the laws of market dynamics. It's literally the model for you to build your own process. So what does that look like? How does that building your own process actually work? I think you should start with simplicity. Simplicity first. It always works. Being simple and straightforward in the NADRO framework is always going to work because the whole framework has edge in and of itself. NADRO is a structure for building a trade. That's what it is. Narrative is the idea, and the acceptance, the DVA, the rhythm, and the order flow are how you access or trade the idea. So what you want to do is pick your favorite reference, whatever that is, whether it's a weekly long-term VWAP, whether it's a CVA structure, whether it's a prior value area. Maybe it's just the overnight value area. Anything that you can use that's built from value, you want to use that as your primary reference. Then you want to build a trade. This is the basic model. Most students that I see getting started, including myself, what we did is we took the content, we took the framework, and we started trading the whole framework and trying to learn our way through it. What we didn't do is say, you know what? I'm going to take the weekly long-term VWAP, and I'm only going to trade or focus on understanding extreme fades and imbalance pullbacks for just the weekly developing value area. I'm not worried about the prior value area. I'm only worried about the current weekly developing value area, which means I don't trade on Monday because I don't have one yet. So there's one exception to that particular reference, right? It's understanding the ins and outs of an individual way of filtering the market. And that's what you want to do. So you want to pick a reference that you can learn or build a skill with. Then you want to build a trade that you can monitor your skill and monitor your own outlook on the market. Are you bullish? Are you bearish? Why? Because this reference tells me I should be. And it's just the one reference right now. Then you want to execute it. You want to develop it. You want to pick a trade for that reference, execute it, and develop it to the point where you don't have to be profitable here, right? You really just have to get to a point where you could say, this looks like a good extreme fade on the weekly. This looks like a good IPB on the weekly, and here's why. That is the basic way I would start most people who are struggling whenever they consume the content of NADRO. Building a trade was the biggest mistake that I missed whenever I started. A trade is important. So from there, I guess this is the model really for what I would say you should be doing. So let's put that into practice and talk about how I would do it or what I did with it. And then of course I'll look at an example. So where did I start? Where do I start with NADRO? I started with structure or market profile, lesson 2. I think that was a particular reference or things that I really like to do. Now you can pick any one of them. You can pick prior value area, you can pick CVA structures, or you could even pick the prior value areas from the long-term VWAPs. The point is you want to use the static references, these ones, the ones that aren't developing. They don't have the word developing in them. So they're always prior value based on that. So from there, I think you can develop a trade within that structure. Right now, I focus exclusively on CVA breakout pullbacks. That's all I need right now to be consistently profitable. One trade. I'm doing it over, a bunch of markets, but that I can tell you right now, that's all I need right now to be consistently profitable. So it has power being simple. And I don't need the entirety of the yearly, the monthly, the quarterly. I don't need all of that in the beginning. right? I just need to focus on one trade, one idea, and make sure that I can read the acceptance, the DVA, the rhythm, and the order flow. Whoops, sorry about that. With that one reference. So keep the narrative simple at first. Then you can add complexity to it later with lesson 4, adding those long-term VWAPs. So I think structure was my way to go. Some people might like long-term VWAPs more. It just depends on yourself. So now I can add the long-term VWAPs and take that into my narrative. After you really understand how market profile works, which I think most people will probably like structure first because it is static. You can pretty much prep anywhere from market close to market open, and have the reference and not have it change, right? It's always going to be there. Start simple. After you have your understanding and an idea of how the structure works, start adding in the other higher time frame references, but start simple. Only add one long-term VWAP at a time. Now, your point here in doing this, I didn't write this here, but your point here in doing this is to look for confluence, that important word that Merritt has in the strength of a narrative section. Confluence is really important for us. Are we seeing a breakout of a prior value area and a weekly? Now we have some inclination that there's multiple time frames working together, right? Also recency and things like that. So only layer one thing at a time. Don't try to balance out all of the references at once. Start with one, then add two. And believe me whenever I tell you, if you just do prior value areas or daily value areas or whatever in just a weekly long-term VWAP, right then and there, you have a system of building your context that is robust enough to be consistent, as long as you consistently apply it. From there, try to balance your views. So maybe add one more long-term VWAP. I personally think that this is like the holy trinity for NADRO. I think that these 3 timeframes in particular, the daily, the weekly, and the monthly, in other words, the daily prior value or CVA structure, the weekly long-term VWAP, and the monthly long-term VWAP put together are probably the core of a really, really, really strong context. From there, you add basically kind of exceptions with the higher timeframes or lower timeframes as to when to access or when to get better risk reward. So let's just kind of summarize those steps again. I think you should first start with the laws of market dynamics. Then I think you should probably move into structure or really pick a reference. Maybe I should put it as that. Pick one reference and build a trade. Then execute that trade. Then maybe add reference 2, 3, 4, into your narrative building. But do it one at a time. And I know that this sounds like, oh my God, that's going to take me forever. Not necessarily. Maybe week 1 and 2 is just the one reference and learning to build a trade and executing that trade. Then each week after that, you learn to add in one more reference. By then, within a month or two, you have at least a way of balancing out your process that is filtered through one reference. Evaluate, rebuild, or build a new trade. So what I wanted to do now is actually look at a real live example from my own trading and how I went back to simplicity to build this trade. This is a look at the RTY, and this was a trade that I recently did not get, but I was frustrated by it. Here's what I was doing. Let's start with the daily outlook. So where did it start? I have to go back and take a look here. Let's get rid of all these profiles. All right, so it was in this pullback phase. Let's see where my composite actually starts. 10-7-ish. All right. So right in here, I guess it started. Yeah, right in here, because I built these two together. Yeah, let me undo all the merges, make sure, yeah, this is all split up. So right in here is where I started building my structure. And I wait for a CVA, and I have a CVA. On the daily context, you're going to see this blue area is that CVA. You're going to see it start to build right here in the volume profile. And all this is day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. Okay, now these are all CVAs, breakout ideas, and that kind of thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at that composite area. Oops, sorry. That we just built right here. Let me undo those merges. What day is that? So we're starting on October 8th. We're going to do the 11th, the 12th, and the 13th. So on October 8th to the 11th, it's a weekend kind of crossover there. We get day 1 and day 2. From there, we get a breakout pullback that comes in right here. The DVA that's here, let me actually turn that off because if you're doing this the way I'm suggesting, you don't need that reference. So where would you see a breakout pullback? Well, here's day 1, here's day 2, here's your value area. It comes back in. Your first breakout pullbacks start to happen here. From there, you would probably go into your short-term view and you would look at, okay, well, what does my short-term market tell me about this trade? Day 1, day 2. Okay, so here are the trades. Here they are, right here. So they're coming up, and what do you see in the, don't really need this stuff here. Actually, let me do this. I don't want to mess that up because I have a bunch of like things that I'm practicing with. Like I said, simple to more complex. So this is all I'm really using to make these trades. I don't use anything else. I have to get rid of some tools, it looks like, here at this point. But it says scroll bar not showing up there at the bottom. Right there it is. Let's go back to our day in question and our trades in question and look at that intraday environment there. All right, so here's our day in question. This is a breakout pullback type of scenario. We've accepted well below it, right? We've accepted well below it, and it's pulling back up. Well, here's our short bearish reference right here. So this would be our first place to look for a short, right? Is it a good short? Well, let's look at some of the other supporting cast. Are we accepted below the level? Absolutely. The market has clearly accepted in terms of price below this level. No problem there. Let's make sure we don't get too zoomed in. Zooming in is a problem. So this is the acceptance picture here. We're definitely below that level. We're pulling back up. Our rhythm. Are we in rhythm? Well, here's an extended move down. Here's an extended move back up. It's about halfway. I'd say, yeah, we're still in rhythm. And you can also see these micro rotations, right? So we're seeing the top of one of these rhythmic moves actually occur. Yeah, we're in rhythm. DVA structure, is that supportive? Actually, it's really not. Why? Because we have an imbalance down here and we have an imbalance up here. We're fading a good location on the DVA, that we're fading that 2.0 level. But technically, we're kind of imbalanced, established. You can see 1, 2, 3 prior rejections to this area to the upside. So the more risk-seeking group, yeah, sure, they're going to short here. The more risk-averse group, they're going to wait for a return pullback. And that's probably the best trade, right? You're going to wait for this market to actually show you the narrative is turning, then use the DVA location to get in later. But what's the order flow telling us? The order flow is telling us that buyers are coming into this market and they are unrelenting. They actually start to pick up their momentum in this section. They pull back a little bit, very weak selling, push again. So you're seeing that type of order flow that's against you. So right then and there, you're saying, okay, well, here's one idea. Here's a breakout pullback from a CVA, a 2-day CVA. Here it is. Is this a good or a bad breakout? You use the rest of that NADRO framework to tell yourself whether or not that's a good or bad trade. For me, I would say this is a bad trade. Why? Order flow is against us. DVA is against us. That's 2 out of 3 things, or 2 out of 4 things that are against us. So we only have a 50% graded trade. That's a failing grade. Don't want that trade. That's how I would go about doing it. And that's kind of what I ended up doing in real life. So what happens there is you get that first day, no real trade. Market comes back inside. You get a great return pullback here. Great return pullback areas down here too. So look at those short terms again. I may have went past them a little bit. I'm filtering everything through a breakout pullback because that's what I'm used to. But look at how good this IPB is right here. Or even this loose one, right? Look at how good these are in terms of narrative. Here is our short. Oh, I'm sorry. I could go to this chart. Here is our short. I don't know what's going on there. There it goes. All right. Here's our return pullback. Now you have a confluent type of idea, right? You have the intraday structure is helping you, and you have a return pullback. Great. I see one opportunity there. I see another opportunity here. I guess these are probably longs. Don't want to confuse people with color. Unless you're colorblind, in which case I apologize. Here's two opportunities at a return pullback. This one, let's say you were trying to go for the other side, the law market dynamic, the traversal of value. You didn't get it. You got stopped out. Fine. It came back in, did it again for you. This one, you got really close, if not all of it. So you probably would have had most of your risk reward off by then. That's the idea here that I'm trying to get across. Even simplicity here with consistency can be really, really strong. Now layering on the multiple contexts on top of that, right? So this is probably your most basic level. Your next level is, okay, well, what does that look like in the bigger picture? Do you want to see what I actually said about this day balancing out the rest of it? So I had the weekly here, and I said the weekly is rejecting the prior value area low. So this short-term picture that you're seeing here, this is that blue circle. So this leg of rhythm came down and rejected a major weekly reference right here. So this leg of rhythm was a complete traversal or a complete trade in and of itself, hit a target area, and we found buyers all the way back to our value area. So that was this whole leg. So right then and there, you're saying, well, now you have a dissonant breakout pullback, right? It's not one that happens over here where there's no other competing narrative. Now you have a narrative that has started down here and has worked its way back up to here. So you see the red and the green? This area here are two competing ideas. Well, which one has more support? Well, this one, the bullish one, has the DVA, it has the order flow, and it also has acceptance. And it has rhythm. It has all four. Remember, our top short only had two. This one has all four. It's a little bit stronger. So for us to want to be short here, just because we have one reference, that's fine. For us to act on that is completely different. We want to be able to balance out the next reference that we're adding. So in step one, where you're just picking out one reference, yes, a short here is perfectly within process and a great trade for you. Once you add that second reference, the weekly, now you have a dissonant trade, and the weekly one is stronger. So you want to wait for this one to confirm. What are you waiting for? Well, you're waiting for a failure of the imbalance to work in your favor at the line in the sand. In other words, you're probably waiting for this area here. Now, did it work? No, but that's part of process. You're going to have trades that don't work. It's okay. You did the right thing, the consistent thing, and that's the important part. So from there, you can just keep adding references. So this blue area, keep your eyes on that, right? You'll start to see how difficult that short becomes. Blue area is the same in all the long-term VWAPs. Now we have the monthly that comes down, completes a narrative, a rotational narrative, and is starting to bounce back up again. The quarterly, same idea. Rotational narrative coming down, 2200 area, bouncing back up again. Yearly, same idea. 22, it's compressing into these highs. That's what you're seeing. That's how you layer the confluence on top of one another. But I'm doing that one reference at a time. So what I would do is I would say week one, week two, what's my context look like? It looks like a CVA structure. That's it. So I have this little composite here. Oh, okay, well the next day, another composite. I can keep going. Oh, look, another one. I can keep going until I get my breakout. And that's actually what you end up seeing in this profile here. But my point is that's all I need to start for 2 weeks. And then I just look at breakout pullbacks, return pullbacks from there. After that, week number 3 or 4, well, let's add in the weekly long-term VWAP, see what that looks like. Help me build confluence. Help me build recency. Week 5, add the monthly. Week 6, add the quarterly. Week 7, add the yearly. Week 8, practice, practice, practice. That's the way I would kind of go about doing it. So I'm sorry if this video is extremely long-winded or doesn't really answer your question. I try to do it to the best of my ability and kind of give you a real-life example with some analysis and all that kind of stuff in the background. So hopefully this was really helpful in just trying to simplify yourself down. Let's just review what I think a great way to go about this would be. I think focus on the steps, right? Focus on the laws of market dynamics. Then pick out one reference, a particular reference that you want to build narrative from. And this is really for market generated information. That's what you want to do. Then you want to build a particular trade, whether that's an extreme fade or an IPB, a breakout pullback or an RPB, depending on the type of reference. Then you want to execute that over and over and over again. Show that you can be consistent with it. Even if you're taking losers, it doesn't matter. Your point here is that you're trying to develop skills, not learn the whole framework of NADRO all at once. You're trying to focus on one skill and then get to the next one. Then add another reference. Add a weekly, add a monthly, add a quarterly. 1 week at a time. Keep evaluating your trade. When does this trade look good? When does it not look good? When does it have a competing narrative? When doesn't it have a competing narrative? Do I execute whenever it has a competing narrative? Or don't I? These are questions that you'll answer yourself within the process and experience over time. So, like I said, hopefully this was really helpful. And if you have any questions or need any further, help with this, just let me know.